Hey, so please like, subscribe, and comment. We really appreciate knowing what's resonating with you, and don't be afraid to make suggestions for future episodes. Hello, and welcome to the July 2025 episode of The Automation Loop, the show that brings you the inside scoop of what's going on at NTC. We're your hosts, Tim
and Tim. Get ready for in-depth discussions on recent developments, our newest blogs and webinars, a peek at what's coming next, and valuable Did You Know insights for Nautobot and network automation.
In this edition, we'll be tackling these three hot topics. Vibe coding. Is it a game changer or just hype?
We'll also do a breakdown of our latest blog posts on device lifecycle management and CVE tracking and the significance of each.
And finally, a deep dive into data provenance. Often overlooked, but could it be the Achilles heel of your automation strategy? We'll explore why ignoring data lineage might be putting your entire workflow at risk and what you can do to fix it. So let's get into it. First topic, vibe coding. A game changer or hype? So formally defined, for those that maybe are not familiar, vibe coding is a software development approach that utilizes large language models to generate code based on natural language descriptions provided by the user. In other words, you have a conversation with an AI model and you write code as part of that process. I'm curious to see what your thoughts were, Tim, about this when you first heard about vibe coding. It's cool? Stupid? I don't know. Where are we at?
Having done this a few times now, it's really interesting. What I really like about it is that I, as a user, can just give natural language descriptions of what I want to the AI. What I've noticed, though, is as if I act like I'm a new user, my prompts are pretty bad, meaning they're pretty general, they're pretty weak. I get back something from the AI and I try and run it, and there's typically a lot of errors. Now you can feed those back into the AI to get corrections to the code after it sees the errors, but the problem is, as a weak user, this might take some time. The cool part, though, is as a weak user who might not know anything about code, I can start to code and start to understand what code looks like.
Yeah, it's, I think, really a very fascinating way to develop your skills of understanding how a new system works or a new language works, and not having to spend hours or days diving into really detailed documentation to learn things. Being able to see just good, clean examples of what it is you're looking for. I know, at least for me personally, versus the old way where I would go and Google for how to do a thing and have to comb through 55 different examples that weren't exactly what I wanted and trying to
on Stack Overflow. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, of course, there was always this paywall. Then you're like, I can't get the thing that I need because I didn't pay for this service. Whereas now I kind of describe what I want to the AI and it gives me back exactly what I was looking for as an example. Now, maybe it's not perfect, but it gets me 80–90% of the way there, right? It's just so much faster rather than filtering through all this junk of what I didn't really want.
Yeah, it really lowers the bar. But what I also found is even for, as I'll say, a moderate user of Python. I've been coding now for like around 10 years, 11 years in Python. What's really cool is if as a more advanced user who understands how code works under the hood, if I give the AI a more sophisticated prompt, I get back what I'm looking for sooner and in a much more usable way so that I have to do less iterations. So there is a place here as well for vibe coding as a moderate to even advanced user as well. In all, I think there's a reality to it, and I think it is going to be a big thing moving forward. Although I do feel like a dork every time I say vibe coding. That is the lingo out there, so that's what I'm going to say for most of my references.
The first time I heard it, I just cringed. I was like, oh, no, please no. Please tell me no, this is not the term we're going to use, but here we are.
Here we are. So, Tim, why are we talking about this now?
If you're familiar at all with NTC, you know that we just released Nautobot GPT, which is an incredible way in which to interact with your Nautobot instance, whether it's getting data back potentially from it, a coming feature, or as far as even this idea of vibe coding. For example, I think one of the great uses I have seen similar to what we were just talking about was, whether I'm learning how to write a Nautobot job or I want to get some data out of Nautobot, I can just vibe code to get that process back. Really, really saving me a lot of time there.
Yeah, this really, what I like about Nautobot GPT is it really lowers the bar because I now, as someone who's familiar with Python, I don't have to understand the guts of how Nautobot works. Nautobot GPT can do that for me. And it can also do that incorporating the best practices that NTC has. One of the big differences between Nautobot GPT and the other LLMs is that Nautobot GPT was trained on, call it non-public information out there, such as our best practices here at NTC, a lot of our internal databases and internal knowledge bases.
Yeah, cool, super cool feature. If you haven't checked it out, definitely do.
And now, Tim, we're going to talk about a couple blogs that we recently published on our website, network2code.com/blog. And both of these blog posts deal with the device lifecycle management application.
So I don't know if you're like me. I'm not always one to read each and every blog post in detail. So let's have a chat about it and kind of see the details of what was going on these posts. Yeah, kind of curious.
Well, the first one deals with the device lifecycle management application being integrated into Nautobot core. This is a big deal. The objects that were available in the device lifecycle management application, such as software versions, CVEs, all those objects are now being integrated into Nautobot core. What's cool about this, not only that you get those integrations as natively as part of Nautobot now, moving forward in 3.0, is that this describes really the story of Nautobot and how it evolves. Nautobot is really neat because it's extensible. It's useful because it's extensible and because it can be extended through these applications. And what's really cool is when an application is so usable that it gets integrated into Nautobot core because it just becomes part of the core use case that Nautobot helps you solve.
Yeah, so if you think of the philosophy of Nautobot, where you have these sort of like Lego building block concepts of these things that might plug in and out of on top of the core framework, as device lifecycle was, eventually we start to see things, or occasionally we see things that become so popular that we say, hey, you know what? Those no longer should be separate. They should actually be part of that core model. And given the forward thinking of the way that Nautobot was designed, we can actually do that without breaking anything. We can add on to that existing core model and adapt it and grow it forward over time, allowing our process to develop and grow and not remain static over time.
Absolutely. That is a key part of Nautobot development, and I think that's going to keep Nautobot relevant as we move forward. And what's also cool, they mentioned in this blog, is how the Nautobot device lifecycle management application will migrate your existing application models into the Nautobot core models. It'll do that conversion for you automatically. And I think that's a big part of it. That'll help a lot of existing users move into what are now the core models in Nautobot 3 moving forward. In 3.1, version 3.1 of the application, there's going to be a capability to automate your CVE tracking. And let me explain what I mean by that. Within the Nautobot models, you have you model your OS versions you're running. And what's cool is this capability in version 3.1 of the app will go out, we'll grab a list of your OSs and go out to NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and query NIST for vulnerabilities related to those releases that you have. It'll do this automatically. So you can go from 1 second of not knowing anything about your vulnerabilities to running this and knowing all the vulnerabilities that are publicly known about your OS versions.
I think this is just incredible. Like, it is such a game-changing feature to not have to do this work by hand. And it actually allows you to really begin to take the idea of managing security and patches on your environment seriously. You know, traditionally, at least for me, when I was an engineer, we worked in environments where we basically just did whatever security team told us to, and we essentially followed the letter of the law. That is, they said we should do, and therefore we did. As opposed to really trying to maintain the spirit of the law, which is, I want to run a secure network. I want to run a network that is not open to being exploited because I haven't patched things correctly, or I want to be on top of these things. And as we start to take advantage of these kinds of automations, we can actually achieve that goal of running a good, secure network. All right, and finally, in this last segment, we're going to dive into data provenance. It's really often overlooked, but is it possibly the Achilles heel of your automation strategy? We're going to talk about why ignoring data lineage could really be putting your workflow at risk and what you could do to fix it. Now, before we go deep diving in, we just want to cover one thing real quick, which is if you're this Tim, you say data like the Star Trek guy. And if you're that Tim,
Data, like the cool kids say. So let's talk about this a bit more. Data provenance, to put it simply, is just the journey the data takes from where it was to how you're seeing it now, where you're seeing it now. And why is this important? It's important because when you have a data, gosh, you're in my head now, Schreyack. When you have a data first approach to network automation, I, as a user, I need to trust the data. I need to trust it. If I don't think it's accurate, or if I don't know where it came from, or if I think it's stale, I'm not going to want to use the data. And of course, the data powers the automation. So trusting data builds trust in the automation.
basically every client I have ever spoken with, if I ask the network engineers, hey, if you want to know a piece of information and you want to be certain of that piece of information, where do you go look? Do you go look in the CMDB or do you log into a device to double check it? And the answer always is I log into a device to double check it because I never trust the data.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll do both to compare it. And so what I want to talk about today is just a little bit, I'll do a short demo here on data provenance and how Nautobot helps you build that data provenance, that trust in the data that you're seeing in Nautobot that will power your automation. So I'm just going to go into a device in Nautobot. This device will do, this first device here. First of all, I want to talk about a feature that is in Nautobot called object metadata. And this is a really cool feature that was introduced some point in the 2.x train somewhere. But what it does is it allows you as a firm to customize your metadata for, in this example, devices. An example we see here is called the device owner. And this concept means, okay, we have the role of a device owner, and this specific device owner is responsible for these attributes, the name attribute and status attribute of the device. And by the way, that person is Carl Schneider. So this is an example of a firm being able to specify not just who's responsible for a device in Nautobot, but who's responsible for the device attribute by attribute. So I, as a user, know who is responsible for keeping this data accurate. Great. Another example, not shown here, could be revolve around the source of truth application, where Nautobot goes out to an external system and grabs its, for example, IPAM data and updates itself with the IPAM data. I could say something like management IP address. I could have that as a metadata type, and then say, okay, the management IP address comes from this external system, say Infoblox, and it was last updated at this specific time, Tuesday at 7:05 a.m. Great. Now I, as a user, when I look at this, understand where the data is coming from and when it was last refreshed. This helps me build just trust in what I'm seeing here on the screen.
Yeah, this is a really interesting concept, especially when you think about in most large organizations where responsibility for different pieces of the information is separated. So maybe the server team has responsibility for some data and the network team has responsibility for other pieces of data. Now we can actually define that and who's responsible for what.
Yeah, and trace the lineage of the data. Who's responsible? Where did it come from? And when did it get updated? The next feature I'd like to show is on the Advanced tab for the device, and this is true for other objects in Nautobot as well, we have this data provenance panel. And this is cool because it just tells me as a user, okay, when was the last change to the data for this specific switch? Well, it was made at June 16th at this time and this date, whatever. I'm sorry, it was created, the device was created now, and then down here it was updated at this specific time and date. Great. Now I know when this device was last changed, but that tells me when, but what I may want to know is what actually changed at that timestamp. And this is a really cool capability. To find the answer to that, I can go over to the changelog. I'll hop over here to the changelog. And this is a really cool feature in Nautobot. I can look, let's just look at the most recent change, the most recent timestamp. And voila, here's the difference. At this specific time and date, user NTC logged in through the web UI and updated the position, the rack position of this device. It was 26, and now it's 22. Wow. What this does is stuff like this really lets me as a user build trust with the data itself. Now I know that the data is not stale. I know who made the last change and when. I know who's responsible for every data attribute. This is key, especially in large organizations, to build trust in the data that's powering my automation.
Yeah, if you think about, traditionally when I just plunk information into a database, if it gets overwritten or changed, it's overwritten or changed. You don't really have a record of that. There's no versioning, if you will. And while this is not versioning in the sense of like Git, we are having this historical record here, so you know who changed it, when, and why.
Yep. Yep. So these are a few features in Nautobot that really help build and trace that trust in the data, and also trace the data provenance, the journey of the data, how it got from where it began to here, and who did it.
And even while it is not populated here on this particular screen, but the related changes, if there were any changes that happened at the same time, they would be tracked here as well. So you could see everything that happened in this transaction.
Yep. And I can't emphasize this enough. In scaled organizations and with scaled automation, this is huge. This becomes so foundational to good automation. So we thought we wanted to share that with the community today, and just let you know that if you didn't know about this feature, now you know about this feature set, and now you can maybe start to employ it to build trust in your automation.
All right, so that's a wrap for this month's episode of the Automation Loop. We covered a lot of ground, from the rise of vibe coding and what it means for the future of development, to the latest updates on device lifecycle management and NIST CVE tracking. And finally, a thought-provoking look at data provenance, possibly the most underrated pillar of automation strategy.
As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Are you experimenting with vibe coding? How are you handling data lineage in your workflows? Drop us a comment, share your thoughts and insights, or reach out on the NTC community forums. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode, and check out the show notes for links to everything we discussed. Don't forget to check out our latest blogs and webinars, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep automating, keep iterating, and stay curious.